So my name is Nancy. I also go by my artist handle NC Qin. I'm originally from Australia, so this is my first year in my graduate program at Southern Illinois University. In Australia, I was originally from the Sydney College of the Arts. So I work with sculptural installation, cast glass, and performance. So one of the things that really intrigues me about working with glass is the psychological aspect of glass, how it can convey vulnerability, and it really tells a sort of human story. So the reason why I have this piece is because it was the piece I made when I was at the crossroads of choosing whether to pursue a career in glass or a career somewhere else. Because as we all know, it's very difficult to continue with this medium. You have to have so many, you have to have a really good setup with kilns, with cold working stations, and I didn't know if I had it in me to really go down that path. And so this work has I kind of play with the optical quality of it. Because it's potential, it's still kind of murky, but you can kind of see the face, my face, inside the belly of the baby. So a hint of the lips and nose kind of peeks out. So the idea is kind of this reverse pregnancy almost, where outside I was kind of like this creature in a fetal position with my eyes shut, unknowing of what I could grow to become. And inside, you had that potential inside of me. So this is another piece that I thought would be a nice opener, because it was when I had my first solo exhibition, this was the piece that was standing at the door. So it's called Portal, and I made it out of recycled glass. And this is actually part of my Kings, Dukes, Generals and Ministers series, which comes from a Chinese phrase, which is Kings, Dukes, Generals, Ministers are made and not born. And that's kind of like the same idea with using recycled glass to turn it into this jade-like material. The idea of taking something insignificant and bringing out the significance in it. And it's about the transformation, which I find is a really important aspect of my work as well. So I'll start diving into some of my research soon. So this work kind of references my positionality as a Chinese diaspora living in Australia. I'm a first generation Australian, and if you listen to Helen Lee's talk, you might have heard about certain generations, immigrant generations start losing their language and identity after living in another country for a really long time. So this work is called Compass Broken, and you'll see this large crack in the middle of this cast piece, and it kind of talks about this tectonic break, and this is actually based on a Chinese Taoist compass. So each direction, each beast represents a cardinal direction. So the most important one for me was the phoenix, because the phoenix is kind of representing the fire, and the fire of the south, because China is in the northern hemisphere. But with me living and growing up in Australia, the equator is actually towards the north. So it's kind of symbolically and metaphorically showing that tectonic break. And it's also kind of talking about this phenomena, which is the cultural generation gap, where where within my generation, people are already starting to forget how to write Chinese, and the stories, which I like to research and reference a lot as almost like a search for identity. And that's part of where I'm coming from as well. One of the terms that I like to use is an intersection culture, where you're living on the intersection of two cultures. You're belonging neither to one or the other. You're kind of a culture separate as your own. So another term for it that you might have heard of that's more popular is third culture kids. So this one is a prelude to one of the more major pieces that I will talk later on, which is called Head Case. And I draw from so this is kind of starting to deal with some of the values that I think are overvalued in Chinese culture that can be pushed on. So it draws from, I draw from Freud's psychoanalytic theories, especially his theory on the superego, which is the idea of internalizing cultural beliefs and morals that are often taught by either parental authorities or society as a whole. So we start internalizing what they say and their expectations. And you can never really live up to expectations, especially if you're Asian. So these kind of imagined expectations or even real expectations can give rise to guilt. So here you can kind of see these three faceless generals staring down at you, judging us. But like one of the things I really like to kind of draw on is like the idea of Chinese culture also. It's not all bad in terms of you have this, but there is still value on it. There's the values that are passed down have kind of created discipline and enduring characters. And it is due to this, but it's also due to this double-edged quality that any feelings of depression and anxiety, a lot of people from Asian backgrounds often see them as just a normalized experience to endure and tolerate rather than to reach out for help. So this brings me to my research, which is the glass armor. So although I made this suit of glass armor last year, it's an idea that I've been incubating for 7 years. So it's an idea I've been obsessing and thinking about for 7 years. And like all good ideas, it came in the middle of a mental breakdown. I was going through my first heartbreak, and I was also going through a lot of internal questioning on what I was doing with my life. And I found myself more isolated than I had ever been in my life. And it wasn't because I didn't have friends or family there who would have willingly helped me and supported me if I went to them, but I just didn't want to because I didn't like the idea of being seen as weak. And so my own sense of ego and sense of pride stopped me from reaching out. And as I was reflecting on what pride does, I came to recognize it not as the inverse or opposite of shame, but the source of shame. And this is where, as I was writing about this idea in my journal, I talked about pride like a suit of glass armor that I was wearing, and it was wearing me down. And I thought it would protect me, but as soon as something actually came for me, it shattered and cut me. So inside the glass armor, I invoke a lot of cultural myths and histories because I think myths are important in the way that they pass on, this heritage passes on tradition, the values that culture would put on a pedestal. And one of the histories that I focused on was the Three Kingdom period, which is 220 to 280 AD China. And they're myths that are still very popular today. So the two characters that you see here are Zhang Fei and Guan Yu. And if you've been to China or you've seen a few of the temples there, they will actually feature on the doors as guardian gods. So they were actually real characters during the Three Kingdom period, but they've been, because of their valor and loyalty and kind of fierceness, they've been deified into, I guess, people of worship. And so the questions I want to ask when I have these when I invoke these myths is, are these values and specific moral orders in these myths or validated by these myths still relevant to the world today? Is it still relevant to contemporary society? So what I'm interested in doing, and you'll see Guan Yu's halberd here, is subverting their stories and focusing on the history that is often overlooked within their stories. And the ones that I'm really drawn to is their fatal flaws, or how they met their downfall, which I have carved onto the backplate of the suit of armor. Because for me, they represent pride and wrath. Guan Yu became so arrogant that he walked himself into an ambush, and his sworn brother Zhang Fi became so drunk with grief on the news of his brother's death that he became really even more abusive to his men and eventually caused a mutiny. So for me, these kind of characteristics of pride and wrath, which probably were characteristics that made them such powerful warriors, there was also that double-edged function to them, in that they also caused them to meet their downfall. And I found myself relating to these stories because it was from pride that I kind of found isolation. And by wearing their stories on my back, I like the idea of bearing the weight of these cultural traditions, and perhaps the idea of these characteristics being the characteristics that stab me in the back. So one of the things that I really wanted to explore with the symbology of armor is that in a lot of Asian cultures, armors are symbolic of pride. It is symbolic of familial pride, patriotic pride, and the function of armor as a means to protect the body by deflecting or absorbing impacts of projectiles and weapons against its wearer. If protection is the essential action, then the use of glass in the design of the armor would render the object dysfunctional. So in this way, I really wanted to make kind of use that idea of the dysfunctional or the abfunctional, which is to move away from function, because pride is a bit like that for me. If we didn't have pride, then we wouldn't have self-esteem, and that's also detrimental, but too much of it could also be something that brings us down, this idea of hubris. So I really wanted to convey the solidness and heaviness of the glass, that maybe if you wore it, you would feel protected because it feels quite thick. It's 180 pounds. If it wasn't for the fact that, if someone did throw, an axe at me, then it could cause it to shatter, and the micro blades will cut into my skin. So this is this is part of the skirt. So it's a lamella skirt where they're woven scales. I've just put this on because I found casting these pieces were probably the most difficult pieces to cast, which I did not expect. It was a toss-up between drilling 6 holes very close to the edge for like hundreds of pieces, or just casting the holes inside. And I found that there was a lot of trial and error, in which first I needed to figure out how to get, when I had the wax positives, I needed to figure out how to get they were creating air bubbles because I couldn't get the plaster silica to get into the holes and create those protrusions. I figured that part out with a vacuum chamber, but then it was a case of once I was steaming it, the plaster protrusions were falling out. And then it was like, so there was a few issues that came with it, but one of the reasons also I wanted to show this piece was the choice of colors was very significant in making the armor. So I chose purple, a deep purple, and this kind of blue amber color, because they were representative of bruising. That was unintentional, but it works. So the idea of purple, for me, it was kind of representational of pride. It's a color for royalty, but it's also the color of mourning, of grief. Because when you think about it, like, to create that royal color, purple color, they had to crush up so many sea mollusks, and it was the death of all these that that contributed to the glory of the royal family. So that the whole dynamic of that bruising, of that color, was a fairly important one to me. So one of the things I wanted to do was to expand my practice into performance. And because I felt like while the armor worked well, I really wanted to breathe life and tension into the sculpture. And I felt like I could do that with an endurance performance. I'm not sure if it's gonna play. So this was one of the first times I performed in the armor. And the types of questions like I wanted people to kind of ask or like think about when they saw the armor was, what type of person would wear a suit of glass armor? Would it shatter and break, or would it potentially be useful? And I also wanted to work with the materiality and preciousness of lead crystal on bare skin to add a layer of precariousness and risk, because there is really nothing protecting me from that glass. If I do fall from 180 pounds. And our familiarity and experience with glass also plays a large role in our subconscious associations with armor, which I mentioned before. I really like the psychological element of glass, because it comes with all this baggage, in a way, but in the best of ways, where when we think of glass, we think about preciousness. We think about maybe a moment in time where we've knocked a glass off the shelf and it's shattered in front of us. It comes already with all this story ready to be used in the symbolic nature. So this was after I performed, so you can kind of see. I didn't actually perform it to failure for that one time, because there's a lot of OH&S, health and safety issues in Australia, especially for performing in institutions. But for me, the interesting thing about this performance for me is that there is no overt movement in the performance. My face is really stoic as well. It is purely about the psychological drama that the audience experiences when they watch the stress that the body undergoes in real time. It's because it's so much glass and steel on naked skin, and it's on my very slight frame. And even like the heaviest recorded armor in Japanese history is 110 pounds. So I feel better about that. So this is a projection piece that I'm working on, and it was a performance that I recorded right before I left Australia. I'll talk a bit about the reactions I got from the performance and what I found interesting. So once I performed it in life, and what I found really interesting was that the people who were closer to my kind of profile, if they were from the creative field, if they were Asian, if they were female, they were more likely to be emotionally impacted by the performance. They felt they could really feel themselves inside the glass armor as well. And they felt like they often came to me and told me that it felt like I was fighting something invisible, and they were fighting that invisible thing with me. So I'll just end there, and that's pretty much the glass armor series.
So I'm going to take a wise question here. So, what was the most heaviest piece?
The back plate was the heaviest.
And I feel like your body went through excruciating pain wearing that.
Yeah, it's mostly on the shoulders because all the glass pieces were kind of put on this steel frame that I welded, and it was just pressing down on the shoulders. And it's kind of like that whole idea of the weight on your shoulders as well. So it was a lot of cramping. And when I did actually do the last performance to failure, because I was determined that I would do it at least once, I did feel myself blacking out for a few seconds, and I was like, no, stay awake. So, but yeah.
How long did it take you to reach that point?
So the last performance was 15 minutes, but it was with 8 minutes previously performing that. So I think if I were to do it in one go, probably between 15 and 20 minutes.
Do you not that you want this piece to break because it has probably hundreds of hours, but I feel like you're pushing it to maybe break. So is that a possibility that you're expecting?
Yeah, I definitely expected some breakage, but I think there is a lot of preciousness to it, but at the same time, I think as makers, we're like, I can make it again.
Do you feel like you're creating your own mythology or your own legend with this piece?
Yeah, I do, in a way, because for me, it is about taking. I really love working with history, but at the same time, I always work with history in the way that it's my version of the story, of my interpretation. It's whether I'm subverting it or whether I'm agreeing with it. It's always, in a way, it's always my version of events as well. I'm trying to embody that, both the glass as well as those stories. Yeah,
I was
so.
thinking, I don't know why, but those times seeing the suit of armor, well, I don't know why, but part of me is it needs a sword.
You know, a lot of people have said that to me, but I'm the sword. Yes?
Beautiful piece.
Oh, thank you.
Every part of it. What do you see next for you? Where is this completed for you, or do you see yourself continuing this exploration?
I do find that I'm as pretty much at the zenith of this piece. So I have other ideas that I want to explore. So you might see a complete 180 from me, but
So you talked a lot about watching the playing with the psychological drama of other people and how they experience the emotions and watching you finish this. How would you say that this impacted you? How did you feel after you took the armor off for the last time and it's over after all this work? And it's really intricate and beautiful, so obviously it took you so much time. And then what it did to your body, how did you feel about it?
a lot of relief,
Yeah.
a weight off my shoulders. Yeah.